Hello Rayclast, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for the Instant Leech Facetank Dual Strike Gladiator. We will start by showing some brief clear footage here, since that's not really the main purpose of this build, and then we will mostly be showing boss kills for the rest of the video. And just as a little side note, I'll mention that all of the Elder and his Guardians here are top level, they're level 80. That's the most you can get to them spawning out of regular maps. Even if you spawn it in a higher level map, like some of these Guardians were spawned out of T15s, they still spawn in a level 80 zone. I'm not sure if they can be higher level if you manage to get them to spawn on Shaper's Guardians maps, but for now these are the highest level I've encountered, which are level 80, so these are the hardest Elder and his Guardians that you're going to be running into. As you can see, the character is a dual striker, using claws and going as quickly as possible. Basically, the idea of this character, after my starting character, the Volatile Dead character for this league, I wanted to make a character to tackle all of the endgame content, specifically dedicated towards taking out single targets. And I wanted to see if there was a good way to exploit the one remaining source of instant leech in the game, that being the Bloodseeker unique claw. And it actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. The damage turned out being a lot better than I thought it would using the Bloodseeker, and the instant leech ended up being fine using just one Bloodseeker in one hand with dual strike. So as you can see, we are moving quickly through packs here in the clear footage, and the packs just blow up. With pretty much one multi-strike of our dual strike, we're using Ancestral Call while we are clearing, which ups our clearing a lot, and we're getting splash from the unique jewel for dual strike, which makes your offhand deal splash damage. And all the way up through T15, T16, the Bloodseeker in your offhand does plenty of damage to kill packs, and they all just blow up with the Gladiator Speed Explosion. And the clear is really not that bad for a true melee range name-locking character, thanks to Ancestral Call. Now we'll probably go into mostly boss footage for the rest of it, and I will talk through all of the different aspects of the character. For this character, we will start by going through gear. Typically I start with the passive tree, but since this character is built entirely around a unique item, we will start with the gear. So we'll start with the uniques here, starting with the mandatory ones and working to the less important ones, starting in the upper left. Got the Might and Influence Viridian Jewel, which is the unique jewel for dual strike. As I mentioned, and you can see there, it makes your offhand deal splash damage to surrounding targets, and it gives your main hand a 20% chance to deal double damage, which if you roll it on a crit and a ruthless and that at the same time, it does just a ton load of damage. The next mandatory unique item is of course the Bloodseeker Hellion's Paw, which is just a pretty average DPS claw. Mine's almost max roll, is up around 256 DPS there. Doesn't have a crit chance roll unfortunately, but 6 base crit isn't too bad for a claw. But of course the main reason we're using this is for its very important gain life from Leech instantly with hits with this weapon, which basically works exactly the same as Old Volpact, and it's actually even nicer than Old Volpact because you don't have to have Volpact, which means you still get your life regen. Now we'll go into recommended uniques. These aren't things you absolutely need, but they're certainly nice to have. Kaum's Roots gives us a lot of life, gives us Cannot Be Stunned, which is really important when you are trying to face tank stuff. And of course, you don't need to have the +1 Frenzy Charges Corruption. That is actually quite expensive this league. The price on Kaum's Roots is shot up this league way higher than it has ever been before. So you can just grab yourself one without the Frenzy Charge enchant when you're getting started with the character. All of the gear I'm showing here is the gear my character actually has. And of course, there is a Path of Building link that contains everything in the video description. So you can go and peruse that at your leisure if you want to spend more time on this stuff. Next we have a Rat's Nest. I originally started this character with an Abyssus, but discovered that the damage was just not worth the extra damage you're taking because I was getting one shot too much, which of course, just like any old Volpact build, is the way you die. You can face tank everything except the things that one-shot you, and way too much stuff one-shots you if you're using an Abyssus, so I ended up switching to a Rat's Nest. We still have nearly 1 million DPS. When we switch in Maim for single target, we swap out Ancestral Call for Maim. We get nearly 1 million DPS, 924k, when we've got our Frenzy Charges and Flasks up. When our big boy Flasks are down and it's just our Diamond Flask, we're still sitting around 600k. So it's got really nice damage. We take out all the content in the game just fine at that level of damage. And you want to look for a Dual Strike enchant there for damage on your Rat's Nest. You can use one of the other two enchants if you want, but the damage will give you the highest DPS according to Path of Building. Next, over on the right here, we have Taste of Hate. Obviously a really nice combo of defense and damage in one flask slot. Pretty much a no-brainer. Again, that's a pretty expensive item. You can use something else until you can afford it, but you definitely want to shoot for a Taste of Hate. Atziri's Promise gives us some nice extra damage in Leech. Pretty self-explanatory. It seems like just about every build in the game almost, except like miners and stuff, uses Atziri's Promise. And then we've got Lion's Roar, which of course is just pure damage. The knockback is actually kind of annoying on Lion's Roar for anything that can be knocked back, because you have to walk up to it between each multi-strike to keep attacking. But all of the big bosses, which of course was the main purpose of this character, are not knockbackable, so Lion's Roar is just a straight DPS bonus. Next we will go into the rare items that fill out the rest of our gear slots. I'll start up with my main hand claw here. This is what you're wielding alongside the Bloodseeker. You just want to go for the most DPS and crit you can on a rare claw. I like the Terror Claw base because of the extra leech. It's really nice. You want as much leech as possible in the character. And you can see I've got a pretty nice one here up at 340 PDPS. And it served me just well. I've cleared all the content with it. I actually did Shaper and stuff with a much lesser one beforehand that only had about 318 DPS. So you don't need like an astronomically expensive claw or mere tier claw or anything. Just a good rare claw with crit and as much PDPS as possible will do you just fine. Next we have the rare jewel that I have in my second jewel slot. This build only picks up 2 jewel slots, which is a little unfortunate, but that's just the way the tree worked out. We'll go to the tree after the gear, but it's just a rare. You can see I've got some stats on it. Needed to pick up some stats in places to be able to equip all of my gear, like the intelligence for the high level claws and the strength for the astral plate that I'm using. Next we've got my gloves. They're just some rare gloves. Life resists accuracy, as you can see. The mana leech is unnecessary because we're using claws and we get mana leech from the claw nodes anyways, but I just bought them for the life and accuracy. You want to pick up as much accuracy as you can wherever you can. That's pretty much a no-brainer for most crit builds. Next we have my body armor, which is an astral plate, life and resists. Nothing real special there. It's 6-linked right now. I'm using a 6-link, but you can definitely get this build going on a 5-link. We'll talk about what to drop when we get to the gem link section. Next we have an amulet. As you can see, this amulet is just life and then pure damage, no resist on it. I corrupted it. It was a POE amulet, which obviously isn't a great base. So I corrupted it, hoping for +1 frenzy charge. Luckily it didn't brick and we got the 3 chance to block, which is actually pretty nice because we're a gladiator. You would prefer the frenzy charge, but the block is just fine. Next we've got my belt over here, which is a Stygian Vice. You'll see it's got like 2 strength rolls and 2 life rolls, and that's just because at the time of the recording of this video, Path of Building did not support the Abyssal Jewels being socketed in the Stygian Vices, so the extra stats I threw on there are the stats that the jewel I have socketed in the belt give. Then we've got a ruby ring and a diamond ring there, just filling out our life and resists, everything we need. And that does it for all of our main gear. We'll move on and talk about the few little extra flasks next. You can see here back to the upper left, we just have a catalyzed eternal life flask of staunching. This is my go-to flask on like a lot of builds. Most builds I really don't bother with a seething divine these days. I just don't feel like it's necessary in most builds. And you just get so much more life from a catalyzed eternal, and it goes so fast because it's catalyzed eternal. And I typically like to have my staunching on my life flask. It just seems to be the most appropriate for having your bleed removal there. And then of course we have the all-important diamond flask. Chemists is definitely the best prefix on that, and I went for warding. You can do whatever suffix you want on that. Don't get heat because your Calm's Roots makes it so you're not affected by freezing or chilling anyways. But you could get like poison removal or whatever you want on there. But in general, I think the warding is the most useful, especially when you're running maps with curses on them. It's really nice to just have that warding on your Chemist Diamond Flask. It only takes 16 or 15 charges there, so you've basically got it up all the time, so you can pretty much just ignore curses on maps. Next, we will go ahead and talk about our gem links here. Our main setup, which is in our chest, is Dual Strike, Melee Physical Damage, Ruthless, Multi-Strike, Ancestral Call, and Increased Crit Damage. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, you're swapping out Ancestral Call for Maim on single target, and if you only have a 5-link, I would ditch the increased crit damage. Next is the utility setup. We've got Whirling Blades, Fortify, Frenzy, and Faster Attacks all linked together. It's nice to have these all in one thing. That way you can use your Frenzy charge or your Frenzy skill to keep up your Frenzy charges on bosses, and you will still have the Fortify linked to that, so you don't have to be whirling around all the time, which would lower your DPS. Next we've got Herald of Ash, Enduring Cry, and Hatred. Herald of Ash and Hatred obviously are 2 mana reservations, and they're just giving us damage, and Enduring Cries so you can keep up your endurance charges on bosses. From the Gladiator Ascendency, which we'll talk about, you get automatic endurance charge generation, so you don't have to worry about it while general mapping. The Enduring Cry is just to keep it up on bosses. Then we've got a cast when damage taken Ice Golem. You can level those to whatever level you feel is most appropriate. I think mine are like level 18 and 16. Again, you can see all the levels and qualities that I actually have on these in the Path of Building link. Of course, you've got a Blood Rage. Even though we have auto frenzy charge generation up, we still want Blood Rage because it gives us more leech and a ton load of attack speed, especially with quality. So it lets us whirl around a lot faster and just gives us a ton of DPS. And again, since we don't actually have Volpact because we're just using Bloodseeker, we get our life regen, which pretty much totally counteracts the Blood Rage, so we're not degenning all the time. Finally, up in my helmet, I've got an Ancestral Protector Blind combo along with a cast when damage taken Vortex. You could definitely switch the blind out for Culling Strike would be nice, or you could just ditch the cast from damage taken Vortex there altogether. It's really not necessary, but it's just a nice little extra defensive layer. And that's just our utility setup. Ancestral Protector, of course, when you drop it gives you a ton of damage, and the blind is really nice for attacking based stuff just to make sure it doesn't hit you as much. Now we will finally go ahead and run through the passive tree for the character. As you can see, we're a Duelist here, and we are a Gladiator. We'll go over the Ascendancy after the main passive tree. Start by just going down through the melee damage, grab some life, go down through Master of the Arena, life, attack speed. We're dual wielding claws, so we get the nice dual wielding nodes, frenzy charges, life, and a jewel slot. Right there, you can stick in your might and influence in that first jewel slot, and it will work. So you can level with dual strike real early if you want to. It actually worked fine for leveling with the Ancestral Call. Ancestral Call pretty much is just amazing all over. And then you go up towards the ranger area, picking up life. I ignored all crit stuff and claw specific stuff for the beginning of leveling this character because I was just using whatever were the best sort of twink unique dual wielding weapons as I went up. So I just grabbed generic dual wielding stuff and life as you go. Again, skipping all that crit stuff because it's just not that useful early. Picking up frenzy charges as we go. Use that blood rage to keep them up early. And we work our way up into the shadow area, and it was about at this time that I was finally switching to claws. You can use, before you get that really nice claw in your main hand, you can use like a wasp nest or whatever you want, and you'll do just fine with it, but eventually you're going to want to replace that with a nice rare. So we started grabbing the claw stuff. You can see we got claw nodes here over on the right. We pick up the claw nodes near the middle here, and we shoot all the way up for the claw nodes here. So we actually get all the claw nodes, or claw clusters on the tree. We don't grab these back ones in the big wheel because they're just not that useful. Grabbing life alongside the claw things wherever you go, and as much damage and crit as you can pick up. It's a pretty basic Fizz Claws tree. I imagine for about any build, this is what your Fizz Claw tree is going to look like. I'm currently level 93. Before you get up to 93, I had just taken this dexterity node here and skipped all of this stuff to save several points. So your damage will be a bit lower, but of course you'll have a more complete tree by just skipping those and going for the more important things first. So that's really all there is about the normal passive tree. Now we'll take a quick look at the Ascendancy Nodes and explain what they're doing for us. As I mentioned earlier, we are a Gladiator. The first nodes you're going to want to pick up are the node to Gratuitous Violence for your normal lab. That gives us the nice Bleed Explosions, which of course improves our clear speed. Next ones you're going to want to grab are Outmatch and Outlast. That gives us the automatic frenzy and endurance charge generation. Of course, we're using Blood Rage anyways for frenzy charge generation, which is why we don't grab that one first. And it just gives you a lot of damage and tankiness as you are at max charges. Then we head over to Pain Forged. That's just a bunch of extra block chance and Versatile Combatant, of course, after that. We're up at around, I believe, 34 block when we've been hit recently, thanks to a little bit of extra block on our Amulet that we got from the Corruption and from the dual wielding nodes on the tree and in the Gladiator here. So that gives us a nice little source of extra mitigation, which just, helps keep us up when we're taking lots of hits from small things at once. And our Leech is definitely enough to keep us up on top of the block, so we do not have any problems with survivability. So as you can see here, this last part of the video has just been a Shaper run that I recorded. This was probably about the 5th run in total I did. It's pretty reliably deathless as long as you just don't tank slams. That's about all you really have to avoid. You can face tank through everything else without any issue. The between phases are no problem. You can even face tank the big slams from the between phase guy here, the little mini Shaper dude. Can face tank his slams no problem. As you saw right at the beginning of the video with the meme, you can even Facetank double beam from the Shaper and his clone is no problem. I have not bothered doing Uber at Ziri on this character yet. Out of these 5 Shaper runs I've done, I've got nothing but gloves, so it's basically just been a big waste of currency. And Uber at Ziri sets are really expensive right now, and I'm worried I would just get nothing back out of it and it would be another huge waste of currency. I don't think you'd have any trouble doing Uber at Ziri. The character's nice and well-rounded, you've got a good life pool, and the damage is there, so numerically it should be fine. I hope you've enjoyed the build guide. If you want to see more guides like this, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. As you can see, Instant Leech is still alive and well in Path of Exile through the form of the Bloodseeker. Don't know how long this will last as builds like this start coming out, but Dual Strike is fun, Ancestral Call is fun, and the build overall just worked really well. It doesn't rely on any vol skills or anything, and you've got a nice health pool, don't need any power charges, and the other charges are easy enough to keep up. So, thanks for watching.